With the recent release of Grand Theft Auto 5, violence in video games has once again come under the spotlight. Tonight I'm asking the question, does this game and similar games influence people to act out these violent fantasies? Violent video games have been around since the 80s. Today's most popular franchises include Call of Duty, Manhunt, and Grand Theft Auto. These games depict scenes of graphic torture and murder. Experts have argued for years whether such programs affect individuals to act out the crimes we often see reported in the media. Tonight's guests will discuss their arguments for and against these games. Earlier, Daryl Farr, an animation student from Hull College, told us why he believes these games are negative on society.
Scientists at the Indiana University School of Medicine in Indianapolis took a group of 22 men aged 18 and 29 and performed MRI scans on them. They then divided the group in half, and while one group was asked to play violent video games for at least 10 hours a week, the second group played none. According to the Sunday Times, the researchers found that the effects on the brain were discovered in the left inferior frontal lobe and the anterior cingulate cortex. An abstract of the report, which will be published at the annual meeting of the Radiological Society of North America later this week, said subjects experienced alterations to their brain. They showed relatively less activation in the prefrontal regions associated with the executive function 1 week of violent video game playing. Responsibility does lie with the parents, but it also lies with the retailers not to sell to underage people. Navy Yard shooter Aaron Alexis, a civilian contractor, fatally shot 12 people and injured 3 others on September 16, 2013. He was a massive fan of video games, especially military shooters such as Call of Duty. He was often late to work because of his addiction. It is unclear whether his addiction to violent video games played a role in his shooting. However, it is argued that these games desensitize others to violence.
Thanks, Daryl. Our opposing guest, games design student Stephen Wood, gave his reasons as to why these games are harmless.
There have been many studies from all corners of the world that have proven there is no correlation between video games and violence. 2 such studies that have recently posted their results prove this. Studies by Dr. Ferguson and Cheryl Alston prove that video games were not tied to violence in high-risk youths. A study over 10 years involving over 11,000 children at the University of Glasgow backed this up by showing that playing video games does not affect a child's mental development. Video games are not the origin of violence. Films, art and history inspire their content and as such prove that video games are not the origin of violence in the world. The key point there being history. Nothing depicted in games is new, and violence has always played a massive part of culture for many, many years. The truth is, video games are just the latest in a long line of scapegoats. Comic books, movies and music have all been targeted by the media in the past, and this is used as an excuse for a distinct lack of parenting. This has grown all the more prominent as the years has passed by.
Thank you very much for that. Your opinions have been very insightful. Now we're going to end the show with some opinions of the general public. These were recorded earlier today in Hull City Centre.
Does video games cause violence in people? No, it doesn't. People are either predetermined to already cause violence or not. Video games does not increase the likelihood. Yes, it gives people ideas, but those ideas are readily available on the internet or anything anyway, so...
I like violence in video games, it's quite fun, but I don't think it makes me a more violent person.
Sort of with any sort of new media over the past, let's say 100 years, there's always been sort of something that's been used as a scapegoat. It was rock music first, and it was, all these funky films horror films that were coming out, and now it's games, and 20, 30 years down the line it'll be something else.
It's a scapegoat. I think the real, what's the word I'm looking for, the real culprit for violence in society is the lack of discipline in the home.
If you look at Japan, they have a series of games where people can live out their violent fantasies, and their crime rate is so low because of it. Because instead of going out into the public and doing these things, they're doing it through games instead. so it rids them of that edge. So it's debatable whether it influences them or not.
People like playing video games and then they happen to do something aggressive and it automatically gets blamed on games. There's always been violent movies, yet they've never blamed like Clockwork's Orange for people doing rape. It's just, I think government just needs something to blame on.
I think that if you look at youngsters nowadays, all they do is just play, let's say for example, Grand Theft Auto, even at the age of 8, 10. And now if you look at the epidemic needle theory, when they're playing that for a very, shall we say, long time, they go out and they literally commit those crimes. And I think that's why you get a lot of, shall we say, reenactments of murder, etc. when you watch the news.
Video games feature their own pros and cons. They are mostly loved or feared. There is a chance that this concept of video games influencing violence may be ignorance, but I wish to close the report by advising the public to educate themselves on the matter.